Good afternoon, Dr. San Miguel.
Good afternoon.
Before we talk about the specific details of the MM003 trial, can you briefly outline the dilemma represented by the management of myeloma patients who relapse on or who are refractory to current standard therapies?
Okay, I think we should separate the concept of relapsing from the concept of refractory disease, because nowadays we have many drugs that have shown high efficacy in the relapse setting, drugs that can put even again the patient into a complete response that is maintained for years. This is a situation for which it was approved drugs such as thalidomide, bortezomib, lenalidomide, bendamustine, and new drugs are coming, including monoclonal antibodies. But the situation is clearly different when you become eventually double refractory, that we call, to proteasome inhibitors and immunomodulatory drugs such as lenalidomide. On top of this, these patients are already also refractory to alkylators. Then in the real world, outside of centers of excellence that they have access to experimental agents, for these patients there is no chance.
So can you outline then the background to the MM003 study and what your main findings were?
Okay, the MM003 trial was based on one drug, that is one immunomodulatory drug, pomalidomide. Is what we can call a third generation of immunomodulators. Pomalidomide showed initially clear activity and efficacy in the relapse setting, and then several phase 1 and 2 trials showed also efficacy in a fraction of refractory patients to lenalidomide and also to bortezomib. Then the obvious next step was to conduct a randomized trial comparing pomalidomide plus low-dose dexamethasone, always the IMiDs, the immunomodulatory drugs, are combined with corticosteroids, versus what it was considered the standard of care for these end-stage disease patients, that was high-dose dexamethasone. The study included 455 patients, and the results has been clearly positive for the experimental arm, for POM plus low-dose dex. In terms of PFS, that was the primary endpoint, 4 versus 1.9 months. Also, in terms of response rate, it was 31% partial responses versus 10% partial responses, 39% if you include the minor responses in the pomalidomide low-dose dexamethasone arm. And what is even more important is the benefit in overall survival. More than 12 months versus 8 months in the control arm. And if you put all this together, plus the tolerability that was pretty good, no peripheral neuropathy, no DVT, low rate of infection, very low rate of discontinuation, and having an oral agent, all this speak in favor of a good opportunity for this type of patients, because I think now we have a new standard of care for this end-stage disease. If you allowed me to add something, is that hopefully this is going to be just the beginning of a good story, because what I think is immediately several groups have decided to combine POM dex, pomalidomide dexamethasone, with other agents. The obvious other agents are the proteasome inhibitors, but also alkylators, and probably the triplets are going to be more efficient. And eventually, these drugs should be tested also in the newly diagnosed patient. then I think we have a good panorama for the future for the myeloma, because now we have this third generation approved. United States has already approved a second generation of proteasome inhibitors, that is carfilzomib. As I already mentioned to you, the monoclonal antibodies, elotuzumab, amazing results in combination with lenalidomide. And in this Congress, is going to be presented data on daratumumab, and the CD38 monoclonal antibody as a single agent is working in myeloma. Then I feel optimistic.
So from what you say then, this seems to represent a genuine therapeutic advance for these patients.
Yeah, clear.
And can you say where do you think we will be in 12 months' time, perhaps?
You mean pomalidomide or all the myeloma spectrum?
All the myeloma advances that we're seeing at this moment.
Okay, I like to be prudent. Some people say, okay, are you going to cure myeloma? No, we are still far away from this situation. Has myeloma become a chronic disease? No, unfortunately, no. Some patients may be already cured, and in some patients the disease is well controlled for many years, but in some other patients this is not the case. But if you look back 10 years ago, when thalidomide was introduced as a new agent for the treatment of myeloma patients, and in 10 years we have already 4 new drugs for this patient. Why not to have another 4, 5 drugs in the next 10 years, and the appropriate combination of these drugs changing the current scenario of the myeloma outcome that is still is quite a devastating disease.
Dr. San Miguel, thank you very much indeed.
Okay.